Good morning. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the audience and a bunch of new faces. I anticipate hopefully some people will be joining us as well as the session goes. I'm really excited to be here with you at Innovation Week. It's actually my first time at Innovation Week. Thank you. I've been following the event actually for a few years, but the timing has never worked out to come out to Calgary and join, so I couldn't be more thrilled to be here today and be able to be a part of the programming. So thank you so much, Platform, for hosting this week and bringing us all together, and for inviting the XPRIZE Canada Hub to be a part of the discussion. So my name is Sarah McCullough. I am the National Director of the XPRIZE Canada Hub, based right here in Calgary. We are proudly supported by our founding partners at the University of Calgary, Alberta Technology and Innovation, and the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund. As a result, we are located on the main campus, and I don't see any of the team members here today, but huge shout out to Guy Levesque and the team at the Hunter Hub for hosting and being our first home and first kind of touchdown space for the XPRIZE Canada Hub. If you've met the team at the Hunter Hub, you know they're an absolutely wonderful group of people to be collaborating with and co-housed. You also know that it is a center and a group that teaches about bold, ambitious entrepreneurial thinking, which is really core to the ethos of XPRIZE. So I can't think of a better place for the Hub to have its start than at the Hunter Hub. Before we kind of get into our discussion today, which I think you're really going to enjoy, I just wanted to maybe give a little introduction to XPRIZE, the Hub, where we're at today, and then of course set some context for what we're going to talk about. There'll be lots of time for kind of Q&A at the end, so make sure you're taking notes. I definitely want to hear from you and have a bit of an engaging discussion with Kristal. So if you're new to XPRIZE, it is in the business of breakthroughs. At its core, XPRIZE takes an uncertain kind of complex problem, the one that typically has no single owner, and they create kind of this shared mission that unites innovators, entrepreneurs, and visionaries and industries around measurable outcomes. Over the past 30 years, using their incentive competition model, which some of you may be more familiar with, kind of challenge-based innovation, essentially starting with a problem and then sourcing solutions and innovations from that lens, they've been able to advance technology development, mobilize global collaboration, and more so unlock new industries. Some of you might be aware, from private spaceflight to ocean health and mapping to carbon removal, they have shown that when you design the right prize and the right incentives, that you don't just get a number of solutions to a market problem, but you get an entire market that forms around the problem, which is really where I think some of the opportunity lies. Maybe a more tangible example, and maybe one of the most familiar examples, is the very first XPRIZE. So the very first XPRIZE was a $20 million space XPRIZE. It essentially created the commercial space industry as we know it today. At that time, it wasn't even thought that there'd be a reason or that it was possible to have private space travel to, or private flight to space. And they've shown that you can actually create an entire market in that area. So thinking about their impact, one of the ways that XPRIZE is looking to scale that impact even further than just beyond increasing the number of competitions and prizes that they have is creating national focal points through regional hubs. So they want to mobilize and scale global impact by creating regional hubs that can become national focal points for competitors, for teams that are thinking about competition, and ultimately to be able to mobilize resources around teams, both pre, during, and post competition. Of course, you may have heard this year, Calgary is home to the very, very first XPRIZE Hub. We are the first and only hub in the world right now, and so we get to set the tone and the pace for how you can leverage this model in your own ecosystem. When I heard that XPRIZE was expanding and they were coming to Canada, I wasn't surprised, because obviously Canada has done very well as competitors, and we have had winners from various past XPRIZE competitions. And I wasn't surprised that they chose Calgary as the place to incubate and create the foundation for the very first global hub. Calgary, as was mentioned in the last panel if you were here, and if you've definitely experienced this past week, is a very open and dynamic collaborative ecosystem. It has such a growing drive for entrepreneurship, and it has a growing pool of talent and resources that it really wants to allocate and kind of use and develop, and has this huge sense of responsibility to not only acknowledge what exists today, but ensure that we prepare for the future, which some of you would have heard when we were talking about the innovation strategy that just launched. So the hub itself is going to look to do a handful of things, but essentially we want to really shape and help amplify the impact that XPRIZE competitions have. We're going to host programs, events, workshops that ultimately help bring together innovators, entrepreneurs, and visionaries, or industry leaders that can help shape what are those next problems that Canada should help solve on the global stage. For example, we're looking at launching the XPRIZE Canada Hub Fellows program in 2026, and that looks to source subject matter experts in various areas that will actually join the XPRIZE Brain Trusts, which are the working groups that actually get to set what the idea concepts are going to be for the next competition. In addition to that, we'll look to obviously hope to support teams and mobilize resources around teams that are looking to compete, so helping recruit and attract new competitors to launching competitions. And then ultimately, hopefully learn, what do we do after competition? So how can we best support what happens after a challenge? Once the breakthrough happens, what does it look like to sustain and scale an innovation? And that brings us to today's conversation. There's really no better way to understand and to start, and no better time to start the discussion about what happens after breakthrough than talking today with CarbonCure Technologies. So CarbonCure is the 2021 NRG COSIA Carbon XPRIZE winner. And that's right, I didn't say semi-finalist or finalist. They won the competition. And we're really pleased to be able to have this conversation today. And I'm going to formally introduce Kristal, and she'll join me on stage so we can get started. So in June 2025, CarbonCure's board of directors appointed Kristal as interim CEO. She had previously served as CarbonCure's chief financial officer. She is a chartered professional accountant with extensive experience in process improvements, operational efficiencies, and building high-performing teams across a variety of industries, including mining, energy, and retail pharmacy. In her previous role, Kristal was the CFO for Arctic Canadian Diamond Company. Based in Calgary, that's right, she's based right here. She has a Bachelor of Applied Business Administration from the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology and subsequently completed a Master's of Business Administration at Laurentian University. To fulfill her passion for continuous learning, Kristal also completed the Director's Education Program and obtained her ICDD designation. Kristal, please join me on stage for this conversation. All right, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so pleased to have you. It's so nice to have a leader and an interim CEO here based in Calgary that can speak to what the journey of CarbonCure has been. So kind of maybe to kick it off for those who might be new to CarbonCure, it began with a bold idea, but maybe give a little bit of background and kind of what makes CarbonCure's approach unique and why do you think it kind of matters today?
Okay, great. Welcome. Thanks for having me. So CarbonCure was originally founded by Mr. Robert Niven approximately 13 years ago. He came up with an idea of how to capture CO2 in concrete. Concrete is the second largest used substance in the world next to water. It accounts for 3 times more CO2 creation than aviation, if you take all of global aviation in the world. So it's a massive problem. He came up with the idea and technologically based to support concrete producers, which will allow them to take a tech box, attach it onto their existing platform, and when they calculate, in their given plant, the strength and durability and characteristics of the concrete they're trying to make, our technology comes in and can tell them and recalculate how much cement you can displace and remove from the mix and replace with CO2 and end up with the same structure and the same characteristics of the concrete that you were starting with. Why it's interesting now is I find even 5-10 years ago, the company, a lot of people want to save the planet and a lot of people want to get involved with decarbonization, but not if it costs them money. And so if it's going to take a hit to their bottom line, then they're not as interested or perhaps not as willing to take a step in With our technology, you can allow the concrete producer to generate savings from the cement displacement. We also take all of the data generated from the batches and calculate a carbon credit for them, and then we market and sell those carbon credits out into the open market, and we revenue share back to producers. So it helps cover the costs of using our tech and the cost of securing the CO2.
Wow. So, okay, so you kind of are saying it's really not just about the technology. The success has also been a lot about the business model and thinking about the end users and the customers and how you can be a partner. How do you think that that's also changed maybe your approach with other corporate partners or investors or other stakeholders within kind of the CarbonCure development story?
Yeah, so I think it's not just a matter of supporting our concrete producers, but it's also helping to enable new markets. We regularly try to meet with provincial, municipal, or federal governments to have regulation change. Today, in particular in Canada, I would say the US as well, they're not changing regulation enough to mandate decarbonization or green building. There's a new initiative in Canada, the Green Building, I can't remember the exact words, New Green Building Initiative. And so that's a start, but I think that there's more that can be done. And then from a carbon credit perspective, it's really getting out and educating. There's a number of industries and companies in Canada that have made net zero commitments that can't do that on their own, within their own industry or technology. And so it's making them aware that we have these credits available, and that by purchasing a credit, it not only helps them meet their commitment, but it also entices more concrete producers to get on board.
Wow. So innovation all around, from the tech to the business to kind of how you work with partners. Maybe flipping a little bit to, okay, so when you joined a couple of years ago, CarbonCure was at the height of scale. It's kind of post XPRIZE. It's kind of in, I think you said 26 countries at this point. Yeah. So scaling a clean tech company can kind of create a different kind of challenge. So how, from your perspective, when you joined, maintaining innovation while managing operations, people, organizations, what did you learn about maybe kind of how to grow the company within that context?
So coming from a CFO accounting background, which I'm looking at KPMG side, it's perfect. I was brought in specifically because sometimes when the inventors or the founders or people who are so invested in the product don't have maybe the same business experience in terms of monitoring profitability, making sure we have the right foundation of information, considering things such as international tax rules when you sell into a new country. And so if you're going to scale successfully, you need to be able to pause, take a step back, and ensure that you have a good, strong foundation of sound business practices. And so for CarbonCure, at one point after the XPRIZE, we exploded and everybody wanted our product in every country, and it was just so exciting. Kind of got on that exciting train, and we sold in countries with maybe not understanding some of the political barriers to entry, or actually being able to source CO2. It's hard to find, and it can be very expensive, which then makes our product more expensive than the benefit that we can generate. And so we've shifted this last 2 years to really take a deep dive into all of our customers, how much they're using the product, what we can do to help support them generate new interest in green building in the regions in which they serve, and focusing on our own shop and making sure that we are a bit more rigid in our approach to how we sell a new unit or enter a new market.
That's great. You got me thinking about, your marketing team must really dive into kind of getting to understand your partners, like the customers, what they really need. You're talking like almost on a community basis. Do you think that would change how you might expand geographically in the future?
I think we will. So I did say we're in 26 countries. Today we really focus on about 13, and we're kind of scaling back a bit. I think a lot of it relates to regulation change, as I mentioned before. So our next big market of entry will most likely be Japan. We have a number of customers who've filed for regulatory approval to use our product there. Europe is making huge leaps and bounds, but it takes time to get ETA regulatory approval there. And so I think Dubai as well is the country that we're trying to break into. So there's a lot of interest, but I say some countries are much more rigid in the regulation process to be able to come in and use a new technology such as ours. So I would say we're working through that process first, and then entering the country.
Well, I feel like that's a good lead into kind of one of the questions I had, and I think it's probably pretty tangible for these discussions. You spoke a little bit about policy, kind of regulations, carbon credit markets, maybe procurement. These kind of maybe can be key to scaling kind of other climate tech and clean tech companies. For CarbonCure, would you say one of these levers was the most effective, or was it a combination of all of them that really kind of gave you like the market traction and support that you needed?
So I think for CarbonCure, it's really been a combination of all. I don't think you can ever just pick one component. For us in particular, winning the XPRIZE was a significant launch. It was like jet fuel. All of a sudden, we were validated. Our tech was validated around the world. We had interest from numerous concrete producers who wanted to launch our product. It brought and allowed us to hire better talent. People want to work for winners, and people want to work for people who are recognized or have a name that's recognized out there, so that helped us. And then I would say it also validated our tech in terms of speaking with government agencies. And so we were successful in getting some approval for use of our tech in countries that we didn't have it previously. So I think it really takes a team effort to get it to go ahead.
A village almost.
Yeah, a village for sure.
Company. Okay. Well, your business model demonstrates that climate solutions can also be profitable, and can not only be profitable for you as a company, but you can drive profitability for other companies and your customers that you work with. When budgets are tight, how do you communicate that side of your value proposition to potential customers?
So today, I would say that's a shift that we made, because I mentioned before, historically, we first started out, we were focused more on selling, and now we focus more on customer profitability. It's getting face-to-face and really having honest, true conversations. Like one of our core values is straight talk. And so if we're meeting with a customer and we walk through what their input costs are for their cement and what kind of volumes they're doing, how often they think they can inject our product in, and there is a requirement. Not every person who uses CarbonCure can be profitable. You have to use it to enough volume to generate enough credits to be able to offset some of the costs. And also, you're paying rent on a CO2 tank, and you're sourcing and paying for the CO2. So you have to use it to be able to cover some of those input costs. In some cases, especially I would say in the last 18 months, we've had people approach us who want our product, but we're not giving it to them. We're either saying, you have to grow, or expand and get another lane, or change your marketing strategy of how you're approaching, because they're not going to be profitable. And the concrete space is so small. Everybody knows everybody. And so as soon as you get a bad reputation from one bad sale or one unhappy customer, it affects your relationship with others. And we've learned that the hard way with some of the early expansion sales we did, and we've changed our approach now.
Okay, that's fascinating, and I think a very insightful thing to think about. You know, sometimes not every customer is the right customer, and it takes a lot to decide that, and also might even mean the future of your business or future opportunities depend on being able to distinguish who is your customer, even if they think that they are. So one of the XPRIZE kind of hub's role is going to be to kind of connect innovators with partners that can help them scale, sustain, enter competitions at some point, if it makes sense and the right one is available. From CarbonCure's experience, what kind of partnerships across industry or academia or government do you feel that have benefited you, maybe that you're currently thinking about, or that would be helpful if they kind of just showed up?
Okay. So I think for CarbonCure specifically, we utilized academia relationships early on. We ended up hiring our chief technology officer from a university out east. who came in. He had specialized science to help us build our product more efficiently. I would say government. When we first started the company, the government grants we got before XPRIZE were essential to get us off the ground and give us funding. By getting a government grant, we were able to secure startup funds from more angel investors or companies who wanted to get involved in the clean tech space. I would say even now, the industry is changing all the time. There's new additives, there's new sources of different inputs for cement to make concrete, and so the industry is constantly evolving, and that in order for us and our product to be seen as valid, we've actually just partnered with MIT in the US, and they've been doing a study to better demonstrate how our technology works. You can actually, they have a live feed to see the CO2 being absorbed into the concrete, which we didn't have the tech to be able to do that ourselves. And so doing things like that will help. I mean, it's really about finding the right partner for you that's going to help you grow your business and believes in your product and will help support you get that product up and off the ground.
That was a really nice kind of holistic view of like from the start of the journey to kind of like where you're at today, and kind of how every ecosystem partner plays a very specific role, and even sometimes just getting involved almost de-risks it for somebody else, and it's really like brings other partners to the table, potentially could be the meaning to get your first customer. So maybe didn't first gain global attention, but gained some global attention after the kind of winning the NRG COSIA Carbon XPRIZE. How do you think, and you touched on a little bit, but how do you think that recognition or the broader XPRIZE model, maybe with talking to other people who were kind of in the company at the time that the team was going through that, maybe influenced how the company, thinks about innovation or scale today?
I think getting exposure and winning the XPRIZE gave, like I mentioned earlier, gave us credibility. In the global aspect in particular, because I will tell you, Canada is not our biggest market, and we actually struggle to get more concrete producers in Canada. Our largest market today is in the US, and from a tech perspective, not a carbon credit perspective at the moment. And our second is Singapore. And so we've had to go to outside markets to grow our business where there's more appetite, perhaps, for decarbonization products, and we wouldn't have gotten into those markets without having XPRIZE, because that was the introduction. Like I said, I couldn't stress enough, having that win validated what we were offering. And so I don't think you necessarily need an XPRIZE to do that, but it helps. And so if not an XPRIZE, trying to find a way to validate what you're offering and showing your customer the benefit that it's going to bring to them will definitely help you grow and scale your product.
Although not, an XPRIZE competition is not an accelerator, an incubator. There is obviously the technical testing and validation, but when you describe that, kind of why I would think about other startups going through other incubator accelerator programs, especially if it's, in an industry and that brand has really good track record of validating and producing startups in their cohorts that are successful. So kind of some similarities there. Shifting a little bit more to kind of Canada's opportunity or the opportunity that might be here in Calgary. We have, the resources and the talent to lead in kind of clean innovation or clean tech. From your perspective, what would it take for Canada to become a world leader in carbon utilization?
I think it has a great potential opportunity because there's so much availability to do something different. I know carbon capture is one that a lot of people in the Calgary market space are working on. I think our government could do more. And I would say that on every level, because from our research, government is the largest user or procurer of concrete, whether it's provincial, municipal, federal. And if we could work to get more regulations around use of green products, not just concrete, but anything that's going to help support decarbonization, that having that regulation, you'd like to think it doesn't come to that, but it needs to help. They need to work together, because you also can't, I give this example all the time, you can't slap the hand of somebody who can't afford an EV car Just like you can't slap the hand of a company who can't afford to decarb because it's going to, at the end of the day, they have to make money and they have to be able to pay employees and run their business. So it's finding that balance. And I'm hopeful that in the future, the governments will be able to work with more green companies to come up with solutions whereby consumers can use the product and governments will help mandate them to be able to do so in a more economic way.
So a role government can play, procurement, obviously a big buyer, especially in Canada, of many things. So I think that's a key point. So I have one last question for you. So just a heads up in terms of get your questions ready in the audience. So when you think about kind of, this is definitely shifting away, but the next generation of innovators. So those who might compete in a future XPRIZE or build the next CarbonCure company, what advice would you give them about building technologies that can both win competitions, but that can thrive and scale competitively?
Good question. I think if innovators are out there today and they're trying to develop a new product, the key thing to remember is what is the benefit for your end user? Who are you selling it to? Because, and ultimately, is there going to be what's the financial result or impact of it? Because I think sometimes, in particular, I have scientists who work for me. They get so focused on that. They're going to develop this product and it's going to be amazing. It's going to capture all the CO2, but it's going to cost a customer $100 million to install it to make it work. That will work great in a lab, but it won't actually ever scale because people can't afford it and there's not enough justification for it and be very challenging to fund. And so trying to work on developing products that people can use that will be beneficial to the end user and are scalable in terms of a financial impact, both from the cost to build and the cost to the consumer to use.
I think a good takeaway, always considering kind of the impact of the customer and what's their business model look like, what market challenges might they be facing, what's changing maybe for them in the market. I think we've talked a little bit about that offline. Just there's a lot of pressures right now, especially in the concrete industry, and margins are tight. So never forgetting kind of who your end user is as a good takeaway. All right. Well, we've reached the point where if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Kristal, or I guess myself, we welcome those. Well, that's fun.
Ready?
Oh, I haven't seen that. That's pretty cool, as long as you catch it.
Corporates, in terms of the interaction with XPRIZE and the interactions that you would have had closer to the end of the competitions, did that actually help you with regard to corporate interactions and interacting on a collaborative basis with some of the bigger players in the world?
So I wasn't at CarbonCure when they won their XPRIZE, but I would say from talking to my peers, definitely. I think as the competition goes and more people are in, there is a bit of collaboration between participants. I think even upon entering in some of the media that's around, it gave us more access to other people who were interested in supporting and helping the team at that time be successful. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Next.
Yes, you were saying concrete throughout your conversation. So does the carbon mix with the cement? Do you work the cement stage, or does it come later, or how is that different?
So at the concrete plant, when they put in their batch system to say this much water, this much sand, this much cement, like the product mix that comes out from their system, our system goes in and says, okay, you can use this much less cement inputs and this much CO2. And so when the way their plant works is the batch system puts it on the trolley, puts it in and gets it overhead before it drops in the truck. A little bit of that will drop. The CO2 gets injected after it hits a certain volume. Then the balance gets dropped and then it gets mixed. And so it gets absorbed while it's being mixed.
And does that affect the color of the cement? Because sometimes there are darker cement concretes and white concrete. Does that affect the colors?
As far as I know, no.
Okay,
But
thank you.
that's a good question because nobody's ever asked me about the color.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a little bit tongue-tied here, but I have an idea that I wanted to ask a question about. And, you talked about the importance of, financial validation, financial model, being able to demonstrate how for some customers, for some clients, as you're trying to find them, that's a really important part. But there's so much skepticism when you're going to present a financial value proposition. Oh yeah, you say that, but it really only happens under a certain set of circumstances. So how much is there, like, do you need a wow factor to go along with a convincing financial value proposition in order to win an XPRIZE or in order to get the next big customer in a new market?
That's a good question. So right now, we're lucky enough that we have historical data, and we have some very successful customers who are our supporters. So they will literally allow a potential customer to come to their plant, tour it, go through the financials, talk about what benefits they gained. But we didn't have that all the time. So I would say probably really rigorous use of data. We constantly are in the market trying to figure out what people are paying for cement, even though it's like a black box of nobody's secrets, nobody wants to let you know. But we work with each customer to try to do that. We look for ways to enhance their ability to sell. So if we can find, so for instance, we just signed a contract yesterday for a company in Dallas that's building a data center. We just sold our tech to one of the concrete pourers on that project because we had 3 other customers doing the pours and they needed a 4th person to come in because the volume's so large. So that helped us. We were able to get a customer on board through somebody else. Like, I think you just have to try to find ways to validate it. What I would say is I worry about the word wow, because then if it doesn't come to fruition, it will hurt you more than it'll help you. And so I think experience and more use and really making sure you can track every nickel, dime, penny that you're saving or they're spending and show them the truth. And sometimes it takes flexibility. Like, we have certain customers we offer contracts to based on volume. So we lease our tech for a monthly fee, but some of our producers, we want to incentivize them to use it more because that gets them more profitability. If they use it more, we'll charge them less because we'll make it up for us on the back end with the carbon credits. So sometimes it's just being able to take a step back and say, how can I make this work for both of us? And looking outside the box at new ways maybe or go outside of your standard contract terms or sale terms.
Cool, thanks.
Okay.
A few more questions over here.
Thanks, you're very kind for handing it to me, not throwing it across the room.
I'm sure you could have caught it. Sure.
We'll see it next time maybe. Thank you for the presentation. As Sarah was sharing about XPRIZE and scale being so important, of course that's where the value comes in any innovation when it reaches mass adoption and scale. I'm curious, Kristal, if you could elaborate a little bit more on scaling plans. You touched on US, Singapore, and key markets and the right size of customer. But with global use of concrete, it seems almost daunting to think about how you could scale this globally to the point where it becomes almost status quo and operating. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit on what does even broader scaling look like, or what would be like a partnership strategy, or how, it just seems daunting. Like, how could you begin to tackle that? I'm curious.
So we're just trying to do it every day. It's part of our day-to-day life. So I would take a bit of a step back and say we learned some valuable lessons when we first started to scale. We went into countries where we hadn't done enough due diligence, and we sold units to customers where we sold them the unit, we're super excited to scale, and then it took 18 months to get source CO2. And so that customer wasn't happy, and it didn't turn out well for either of us. So you have to be careful when you scale. What we've changed about that is, so for instance, in our scaling in Japan, we're not in Japan yet because we need regulatory approval. It's a very unique situation there where each company has to apply on their own. We've partnered with one company who's put their application in. We should have an answer by May or June. We're expecting to receive that. But we've worked with them to create a cohort of a number of producers in Japan, because Japan has a very large appetite for decarbonization in any type of construction they're doing. And so it will triple effect for us. Like, we'll get that one, and then as soon as that one has it, the rest of them are all, and they take their business approach there is very different. It's a partnering. Like if we as one customer come up with a great idea for the environment, we want everybody to be involved in it. And so that's been a great support for us. I would say trying to find those partnerships. We're having a very difficult time in super large world producers of concrete because they own their own cement supply. And so if you want to cut the amount of cement used, you're taking away basically revenue from the right hand and being a benefit for the left. And that is challenging. We haven't been able to break that yet, but we continue to try to work on that. And then doing research around who actually has regulations, what governments are moving, and how quickly can you get in, I think, and scale. And then the last piece I would say is your people. So having our people are our greatest assets, and what we've learned is as you go to scale into those countries, you cannot send a salesman from Halifax, Nova Scotia to somewhere in Latin America who you have a language barrier, you don't understand the cultural differences, they won't even let you in the door, and you're wasting time and money. So now in our core markets, we're hiring local tech services and salespeople who either are already in the concrete space or have connections in the concrete space, more than the tech side. In the past, we also tried tech. Now we're focusing more on concrete. So I would say trial and error, but focus and precision in terms of do the work up front before you go in, because otherwise it could be costly and a waste of your time and effort.
I guess two more.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question regarding to your insight about what we are doing actually. I'm working with it. I have been working with a team to produce hydrogen from methane, and one of the byproduct is carbon into a form of solid carbon. And to give you an example, each 100 kilogram of hydrogen, which is really in need at least in North America, produce 300 kilogram of carbon in the form of solid. And we are, this technology uses plasma to produce hydrogen very efficiently. But at the end of the day, we don't know what should we do with the solid carbon. And I'm looking for your insight, what could be an application for those solid carbon. Literally, we can put them in the concrete, but I haven't tried, or I'm looking for insight.
So, again, accountant. But I have an excellent chief technology officer who works for me. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, then I can forward his information to you and you could reach out to him. Because we have a lab, our head office is in Halifax, and we have a testing lab and do a lot of work there on new products or new cements or new things that are happening in the industry. So I can put you in touch with him and perhaps he has an answer for you.
For sure.
Yeah, and like Bioforce Tech does takes wastewater sludge and turns it into straight carbon through pyrolysis, and they've been sticking it into concrete, which makes it black. This doesn't make it black. The change they're doing here, it's just like the concrete that you see up here is absorbing CO2 as we're sitting here right now. And so what they're doing is pretty cool because you can actually measure how much carbon dioxide they're actually putting in. So this up here is already absorbing carbon dioxide over a really long period of time. So what you get to do is validate that process, which is amazing, right? So Bioforce Tech takes solid carbon and puts it into cement and also gets validation credits for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Time for one more? All right.
Thank you. Thanks for not throwing it at me. Hi, Kristal. I've been following your company for a couple of years. So I have a question. Once you won that $20 million, what expectations changed from investors and also more pressure from, let's say, XPRIZE to do and make it better? I believe you raised your $80 million in 2023. So having a $20 million lump sum change, I suppose, compared to the value of the company. But did that change the expectation of the board and investors to quickly scale? And particularly when you scaled back from 26 country to 13, how did you manage those challenges?
Sorry, I have a cold. I would say there was a lot of questions in there. I'll try to get through all of them. So at the time we won the XPRIZE, we had received most of our funding through other government grants or angel investors, and I would say the funds were absolutely needed to keep going. Winning the XPRIZE allowed us to, it really lifted our reputation and the type of investor who came to us next. Our next big financing, we were very fortunate to secure funds from major players. So it's on our website. We're backed by Amazon, Samsung, Mitsubishi, and Bill Gates Environmental Trust, one of his funds. And so that changed for sure our ability to source revenue or cash flow for our operation. However, I would say at the same time it did also interject a return. So these companies are investing because they're not just investing money, but the dollars they invest, they want to see a return so that the return can have a greater impact on the decarbonization, their decarbonization efforts. And so I think that's probably how I came in, it was that shift from just spending money to develop tech and trying to sell your tech to actually turning it into a revenue generating company. And so there's definitely different expectations. And if you're going out to fundraise, you should make sure you understand all those expectations before you do it and be prepared for it. Because it lifts your game. I think a lot of innovators, when they're first starting, they're just trying to get through. So produce the financials as best they can, keep track of their inventory as best they can, do some pricing. And now, like, we've totally revamped our accounting system, our reporting systems, our tax structure, our corporate structure, like a lot of upping our game, so to speak, over the last 3 years as a result of that.
Thank you. I think just a round of applause for Kristal for taking the time to join us today. It was so nice to have you. This has stopped working. Okay. Well, just thanks everyone for joining us. If you want to learn obviously more about CarbonCure, you could, well, you missed it now. Hopefully you got their website. You can also follow them on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with XPRIZE, you can find it at, you can email us directly at the XPRIZE hub at calgary.ca. Reach out directly on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with you as well. It's just, yeah, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.